This TFMR podcast is brought to you by my friends at SD Bullion. SD Bullion always has some of the most competitive pricing in the business, so please be sure to visit sdbullion.com every time you're in the market for some physical precious metal. Hello again from TF Metals Report, and here are your podcast highlights for the week of October 7th through October 11th, 2024, a week that began with the precious metals on their heels, but would the week end with the precious metals charging forward? Well, we didn't know for sure how the week would end as we got rolling back on Monday the 7th. A lot of things to talk about that day, but here's a chart that we discussed in our daily podcast, actually a chart that I included in my weekly public article that I write for Sprott Money. You can go to sprottmoney.com and find that article. Anyway, we focused on silver and where silver might go from here as it tries to play catch up with the gains that we've seen in gold this year. Anyway, this chart, this long-term chart, offers a few clues. And that's all part of what we discussed as the week began on Monday the 7th. And then finally, I took the chart, the silver monthly chart, had this last week, maybe back on, I don't know when I had this. Anyway, you can see what's going on here. I used this chart for my Sprott article this week. And I added all these extra lines. Okay, now that's up and away from 28 and moving higher. The resistance that we're finding right now makes sense. That's a resistance that we had back in early 2013. We get through here. The next level of resistance is what was resistance from late 2011 through all of 2012. That area up around 35. Okay. After that, you're talking 42 and then 48. But look at this little bull I drew. Start a line there in 2011. You put it out there to about 2019, roughly, late 2018. That's 7 years down. 7 years back up is 2025. And you can see how this bull lays on here. Yeah. So, as we discussed last week, the last 3 times silver has had a big year, it has followed on with another big year the next year. It's having a big year this year. I suspect it's going to have another big year next year. And this chart would suggest the same. Even though precious metal prices were falling early in the week, and even though the mining shares were going down as well, we noticed something that offered some opportunity perhaps in the mining shares. The GDX ETF had come down to its 50-day moving average, which is what it's done quite a few times this year in pullbacks. And notice on this day, Tuesday the 8th, while the precious metals were down, and the shares were down too, the candle was green, which meant the GDX actually closed higher than where it opened. That's usually a sign of some accumulation during the New York Stock Exchange session, and that can be a good signal as well. All part of what we discussed Tuesday the 8th. And finally, look at this in the GDX. Again, this is just the last 6 months, but you can clearly see higher highs and higher lows, right? And look at the last 3 of these higher lows. Came down, spent almost the entire month of June below the 50-day, and then rallied sharply into July and made a new high. Came back down early August, spent 4 or 5 days below the 50-day. Rallied, made a higher high. Came back down early September, spent 4 or 5 days below the 50-day. Rallied, made a higher high. And now here we are again, tapping the 50-day moving average. If we fill the only thing that would make me nervous, we suddenly came back down to like 35. Duh. But for now, how is this pattern any different? Below the 50-day in early July, by the time you get deeper into July, you got a new high. Below the 50-day early August, deeper into August, new high. Below the 50-day early September, into late September, a new high. And we got all these great earnings reports coming. Look, if you want to buy some calls, this is the kind of action you want to see. Wednesday the 9th brought another down day for COMEX gold prices. However, prices have now fallen right into the support zone that we'd been watching. 2620 had been resistance on the way up in the last up leg, so you'd expect that would be the first line of support on the next pullback. That's exactly what has happened these last couple of days. All part of what we discussed on Wednesday the 9th. All right, looking at the chart of gold. Where are we looking for support? That's never any fun. Much more fun to look for resistance, because that means you're moving higher. When you're looking for support, you're moving down, and that's 4 red candles in a row. Really, probably almost 5 out of 6. So that's no fun. Getting through the red line here, which is just the 20-day moving average. That's the shortest of them. But again, you can see this is not unusual. Okay, just going back to June when it kind of double bottomed and was basing down there below 2,400, rallied into the middle of July, pulled back, and on several occasions was below its 20-day, and then rallied, and then rode the 20-day in early September, and then rallied. So here we are again. It's logical to look for support here at 2620. Why? Because the most recent little 5-day consolidation back in September, that was resistance. But, even if we could pull all the way back down here and drop another 50 or 60 bucks. And that wouldn't be the end of the world. Present a hell of a buying opportunity in a trade. This little box here. But that, as we discussed yesterday, I'd rather see gold reverse and trade for a handful of days kind of along the 20-day, like it did back from September 3rd to September 13th or 12th. See that area there? And then blasting higher. That's what I'd like to see it do now. Now, of course, it doesn't matter what I'd like to see it do. We'll see what it does. Mentioned the GDX ETF earlier in this podcast summary. And again, we're watching the GDX closely. I even bought some calls on the GDX on Thursday. One of the component stocks of that ETF is AEM, Agnico Eagle Mines, big holding of mine. Interesting position in this chart as well, falling below the 50-day, but now threatening to move back above it. Could it close above it on Friday? And if it did, what would that signal for the weeks to come as we get closer to earnings results and earnings summaries later this month and next? All part of our discussion on Thursday, October 10th. Finally, just thought I would update this. AEM has a very similar chart. Obviously. Let's watch AEM tomorrow. Because the last couple times it's come down before making a new high, it didn't get to the 50-day. Remember talking about that back in early September? We get down to 76, then it went from 76 to 84. Well, notice we fell down below the 50-day in AEM last, Friday? Now we're getting close. That thing's going to be just below 80 tomorrow. So we get AEM to close up and over 80 on a Friday. Be a really good sign. The next move should take it to what? 86, 87, if that next move materializes. That's probably something you could trade too. And on Friday, October the 11th, COMEX Gold completed a full round trip after the beating it took earlier this week. Up day yesterday, big strong up day on Friday to actually close up on the week. Sure didn't look like that was even a possibility back on Tuesday, but here we are, gold up $9 on the week. Doesn't sound like much, but that's a very pretty green candle on the daily chart and on the weekly chart. On this daily chart, you can sure see the breakout of this most recent bull flag. Does this mean we're going up to double top? Does it mean we're going up to make a new higher high? Well, that remains to be seen, but it certainly looks like we're going up. That's for sure. In a week ahead that will be mostly quiet, at least on the economic news front. In fact, Monday's a bank holiday in the U.S. Oftentimes, that's a good thing. Get the banks out of the trade. And then later in the week, a few bits of economic data, but not a whole lot of market-moving stuff. So we'll see what gold does. Silver, too, as we take on the week ahead. But what a solid finish to this week, that's for sure. Thank you for listening to the TF Metals Report podcast highlights for this week. Again, daily podcast is part of what you receive as a subscriber. Only $15 a month to be a part of the community. Please check us out. TFMetalsReport.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.